There's a kind of prison without walls but built of goals. It doesn't confine you by force but by expectation. And the cruelest part, you built it. Brick by brick, image by image, compliment by compliment. The ideal began as a beacon, hope, direction, the promise of wholeness. But over time it ceased to be a horizon and became a demand. With each step you took, it receded, always whispering, "Not enough yet." You ran. You refined every detail of yourself, more composed, more productive, more evolved, always chasing the elusive more. Yet the more you neared, the further it moved away. One day, without noticing, you stopped walking for love of the path and started walking to escape the feeling of being stuck. The ideal took root in your relationships, your body, your spirituality. You began comparing yourself to versions that never existed. The more serene, wiser, unwavering self that lives in imagination and expects you to follow. And the greatest hurt wasn't failing to be that version. It was not being able to stop trying, because every attempt felt virtuous yet left you numbed. You built an altar for your ideal self, and every morning you knelt before it. And yet, you never felt worthy of your own devotion. Perhaps you don't notice, but you mourn someone who never existed. The self you constructed, braver, more organized, more compassionate, more steady. You clung to that projection and treated your real life as failure. Every fearful moment felt like collapse. Every anger felt like regression. Every request for help felt like betrayal of the ideal you struggled to embody. But no one tells you that the ideal is a demanding fiction. It doesn't celebrate. You just notice what's missing. It doesn't embrace imperfection. It tolerates it as something to overcome. So, you feel ashamed to be human. You try fixing feelings that only needed to be felt. You try improving pain that just needs presence. And you push yourself even when your body calls for rest, solitude, pause. The ideal, masked in light, draws you away from truth. And truth is simpler, quieter, more flawed. Truth doesn't want to be shown. It wants to be held. That's why you stay alert, because you know, even if silently, that to be real, you'll have to disappoint the image you built. And disappointing that ideal might feel like failure, but maybe it's the very start of freedom. There comes a moment when your body begins to resist the soul pretending to lead. You wake exhausted with no reason. You feel vague anxiety, as if under an unpaid debt. You lose spark, curiosity, desire. Yet still you push, taking steps, repeating mantras, climbing a ladder that has no top, believing that pausing means falling. But your body knows. It senses when the journey has shifted from living to obligation. It sends you insomnia, tension, exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. Because the burden is not in your actions, but in the persona you sustain. That persona isn't evil. It was born of fear. Fear of being simply you, and you not being enough. You've mistaken clarity for control, peace for absence of conflict, spirituality for emotional perfection. And even surrounded by ceremonies, you never truly rest. Because every practice aimed at avoiding failure, hiding flaws, and sustaining image. But growth isn't about avoiding falling. It's about learning to fall without shame. It's stumbling and still loving yourself. Nothing ideal teaches that. Only reality shows the way. Perhaps it's time to listen to your body, to let it admit that it's tired of holding up who you wanted to be. Because behind that exhaustion lies a whisper. May I just be me? There's a beauty that only appears when you release the effort to improve. It doesn't shine like the ideal. It breathes like truth. It shows up when you accept that you won't fulfill every promise, reach every milestone, or match every version you dreamed. And yet, continuing to be. There is sacredness in that. In that moment, disarming begins. You sit on the floor without hurry. Stop trying to impress even your own ghost. Notice the day with less expectation, and find beauty in the ordinary. A warm cup, imperfect conversation, silence that means nothing beyond itself. Reality finally becomes enough. You realize that your most alive selves never looked chosen. They were simply you, crying without reason, laughing at nothing, loving unguarded. They were present. Presence doesn't need preparation. It needs surrender. And the ideal that once vowed wholeness now shows its true face. A subtle escape from intimacy with your own imperfections. At that moment, you understand. You didn't need an ideal to feel whole. You needed only to give space to what was already there, waiting for you to stop trying to be someone else. When you stop trying to be better, you don't reveal your worst, you uncover who you are. A quiet space opens where you hear yourself, without correction. Where mistakes aren't shameful, they're just part of the path. Where stumbling isn't delay, it's rhythm. A body slower but more true. A mind less sharp but more honest. A heart not always open, but always present. In this space you notice that what felt insufficient was sensitive. What looked like weakness was care. The unhurried pace became listening. Fatigue, a sign of boundaries. That fear you tried to conquer was simply a soul asking for gentle holding, not repair. Reality presents itself unfiltered, unprepared, unscripted, and for the first time you don't feel compelled to fix anything. This isn't surrender, it's return. A return to that state before judgment. The place in your soul that doesn't chase grades, applause, or transcendence. Only presence, only truth. And that truth doesn't dazzle, it endures, doesn't impress, but holds space. And it quietly begins dissolving the image you once held sacred. Because before what is real, the ideal loses its purpose. That breakthrough might bring shame. Shame over how tirelessly you strove, how relentlessly you chased. But that shame fades, and when it does, it leaves ground. Ground firm because it's imperfect, and it's yours. After chasing an extraordinary self, you might be surprised by the relief in being ordinary. Not obscured, but whole. Not needing to prove worth, carry brilliance, or stand out. There is peace in knowing you don't have to be special to be worthy. That you don't require constant light to be valid. You begin to look at yourself with compassion. That silent days weren't wasted. They were roots. Times of confusion weren't derailments. They were pauses for reordering. Those setbacks were your soul needing the ground under your feet. That which you once hid makes you human. This peace doesn't arrive in fireworks or certainty. It arrives like a breeze. A weariness that doesn't demand healing, but gentle sitting. You stop seeking the final version and walk with what already is. No hurry, no stage, no hitting some ideal standard. And in that authenticity, something blooms. The capacity to love not just what inspires, but also what hesitates. There is beauty in flaws that need no justification. Truth in presence that doesn't need to be more than itself. That is the peace the ideal never gave, but reality always held for you. The day you stop trying to become someone is the day you start truly being. No scripts, no striving to impress your own inner judge, no chasing approval. You simply listen, and for the first time what you hear asks no interpretation. The emerging voice isn't flawless, but it's yours, and it's enough. Because reality never sought applause, it sought room. The ideal falls silently. It doesn't explode, it dissolves. Weakens as you allow simplicity. Embrace being broken, accept being partial. With each layer shed, something new breathes. Tenderness without expectation. An unmeasured gaze. A presence defined by what you carry, not by what you deliver. And what sustains isn't the projection of yourself. It's the you that already was. You begin living with less tension, speaking with more pauses, loving with embodied presence, erring with dignity. Because a mistake no longer blemishes your image, it reveals your humanity. And in this space where no ideal lives, life approaches, not to be understood, but to be felt. The real, at last, happens. And the phrase that echoes when your self-constructed figure descends the altar, when the ideal dissolves, the real finally breathes. If you too are exhausted from chasing your best version, share in the comments what can now rest in you. Return anytime the ideal creeps back. Here, reality requires no permission.